r/NoSleep, posted by Reddit user Spike Goddess. I run a museum of cursed objects. I think it's time to talk about the object. Before we begin, if you're new to the channel or new to the story, please be sure to check out the other entries of Cursed Museum. Without further ado, inside the cabinet, it was odd. There was no light at all, but my eyes didn't strain to see. My brain didn't register the nothingness. It wasn't exactly black or dark. It was just nothing. Empty. Like the knot, I supposed. I groped for the doors behind me, only to nearly fall over when there was nothing but emptiness there. I felt ahead of me, and there too was nothing where the wooden back of the cabinet should have been. I thought I felt something digging into my shoulder, but it was quickly gone. The beginnings of panic burned into my chest, but I squashed them as best as I could. The door had disappeared, so I had no way out, but things got out of the cabinet somehow. I just had to try to be one of those things, and hope that being in the cabinet didn't somehow turn me, myself, into a horror. I certainly didn't feel like a horror, just scared and angry, and a little hungry maybe. But then, I know enough about the odd things in the world by now to know that very few cursed things are aware they are, cursed. Although, I swallowed, hard, racking my brain for answers that didn't come. I knew very well that the cabinet never exposed the same reality when it opened. If I was somehow in here with the knot, didn't that mean the cabinet would never open for me again? As it was, I could only assume I was here with the knot, especially given my strange surroundings. I considered staying right where I was, hoping someone from the outside world would open the cabinet. But in my heart, I knew that probably wouldn't work. I was certain M would be trying to open the cabinet at some point, but I had no way to know what havoc Courtney was continuing to wreak, or how badly M was hurt. I bit my lip anxiously at the thought, her scream echoing in my head. No, staying put probably meant time wasted, and nothing else. I took a deep breath, and ignoring the trepidation weighing down my body, I stepped forward. I don't think you probably realize it, but the air you exist in, the atmosphere, provides just a little bit of resistance when you move, a little bit of drag, a little friction. Not enough to stop you or even make things difficult most of the time, but it is there. And when it's not, you notice it. There was nothing like that in the cabinet. No resistance whatsoever. I stepped forward and nearly fell over. The movement's too easy and too quick. I caught myself before the fall, terrified that if I hadn't, I'd drop into the endless abyss yawning underneath my feet. I waved my hand experimentally in front of me, trying to become accustomed to the air, if it could even be called that. Vaguely, I realized that I hadn't taken a deep breath for a while, probably since I'd entered the cabinet. I tried, and the action felt unfamiliar, and caused my chest to seize and spasm. So, no air resistance, no breathing, no air. I tried very hard not to think about what that meant for my survival. I did not succeed. Now, somewhat acclimated to my surroundings, I started forward again, peering into the not quite darkness. Every so often, I glanced behind me, just to find the same emptiness there. Nothing ahead, nothing behind. To the left and the right, more of nothing. Alexis? Behind me, where I just looked, the voice rang out. I had spun around so fast, I nearly fell again, and found myself face to face with May, my mother. I choked. Mom? She tilted her head. The smile on her face was so familiar, my heart ached. Alexis, it's dinner time, she said, her tone the way it always used to be when she scolded me. I swallowed heavily. My eyes burned, but no tears came. In the cabinet, I supposed, they probably couldn't. Mom looked me up and down, frowning now. She reached out a hand to touch my forehead, and hers was ice cold, but it was soft and smooth. "Alexis, honey, you running a fever?" I shook my head quickly. My mind was racing. Surely, this had to be a trick of the cabinet. How was she here? Aren't we in the knot? It came to me then as Mom led me into more nothingness. Smooth, cold hands. My mother's voice. But something was wrong. Something off. This woman, this thing rather, that pulled me along so gently. It was one of the knot, and I was sure of it. And I understood something else, suddenly, too. This dimension I was in, it wasn't just inside the cabinet. Maybe it was the world of the knot. Maybe out there, in the world I lived in the world of Em and Courtney and everything that I knew, the faces of the knot weren't right. But here, in their world, they were perfect. I could see them clearly, and they were perfect. It didn't bother me so much, all of a sudden, that they were the knot. It was still my mother, wasn't it? That digging sensation in my shoulder again. Annoyed, I swung my head to the side. A slight rustling noise resulted. Continuing to walk forward with Mom, I caught the glint of two beady black eyes in the darkness. My stomach dropped. The crow. How could I have forgotten? He had been on my shoulder still, when I'd walked into the cabinet. I locked eyes with him, mind still reeling. And just like that, my head cleared, as though a fog was lifting. I was with the knot, and not my mother. The knot, not May, not Mom. "Come on, honey. Your mama's waiting for you," the knot mom said. "Okay, Mom," I said, forcing my voice to come out. The crow's talons were reassuring weight on my shoulder. The nothingness around me congealed, somehow, so that I knew we were making progress, that we were moving forward. And there was Mama, grinning that little lopsided grin she always did. "Come on, Heart," she called out. "We're celebrating today." Just like that, all the blood in my body turned to ice, because this wasn't a random encounter with my not mothers. It was a specific encounter, a recreated memory, and that same moment I realized that, I knew exactly which one it was. "No," I tried to whisper, but what came out of my unwilling mouth instead was, "Come on, Mama, it's not that big a deal." "Nonsense," Mom said, moving from my side and taking a seat. There was no table there, nothing substantial, just the nothingness. She sat nonetheless. I could almost picture the old dining table, its dark oak tarnished by some red Kool-Aid I'd spilled when I was a kid. "You've done something incredible, honey. We're so proud of you." "You're embarrassing me, Mom. I'm a grown woman," my mouth said. My eyes burned fiercely. I wanted to scream and cry. "Not this memory. Not this one, please." I thought, please. At the time, it had been a great day. I just managed to retrieve the first cursed object I'd ever handled by myself. It had seemed pretty benign. My mothers were very adamant that all our cases were done together until I was a real, proper adult. That was how my family had always done it, especially since children are often so suggestible. Vulnerable. Curses love to manipulate the vulnerable. So no children in our family, no one under the age of 18, had ever been allowed to take on a curse alone. Since I had turned 18 the week before, well, I had finally done a case on my own. And I was now being forced to remember the worst thing that ever happened to me. "Come on, Heart," Mama insisted. I felt myself sit down, felt nauseous at the emptiness supporting my weight. "Why don't you tell us about your very first cursed object?" I lifted nothing to my mouth and took a bite. All right, hold your horses," I laughed. "It was an easy one, but you guys knew that when you sent me, right?" Mama was serious when she answered. She said the words I knew now would echo in my head for years. God, I had them memorized, but hearing them in her voice again, Alexis, curses are many things. They're complex, multifaceted. They're versatile, but they aren't easy. They aren't hard. There's not one good curse, or a bad one. They're things of habit, of specifics, situational. Always remember that. I did. It would have been impossible not to, considering what happened next. Well, after dinner, let's go take a look at it. Write up some details, huh, Alexis? Said Mom. No, screamed my heart, my mind, my soul. No, please, let's not. Let's leave the damn thing in the box and forget about it and never touch it again. Let's have dinner, watch a movie. Let's go to bed, and then we can wake up tomorrow. All of us together. Yeah, I said. I sat and ate nothing that tasted of nothing, and the void around me seemed to cackle at me, relishing at my despair. You see, I never intended to tell any of you about the object. I really, truly was going to leave it in obscurity. I don't want to talk about it. Unfortunately, I'm unable to tell you the story without telling you about the object. So, I said unwillingly, I showed up to the address you gave me, and the lady told me the same thing you did. She'd been hearing crying and sobbing every single night from 3 a.m. to 3:33 a.m. Apparently, it's only been going on for a couple of weeks, ever since she went to a police auction. I figured it must be tied to something, so I had her gather everything she'd bought and stayed the night in the room with it. Sure enough, come 3 a.m., this awful wailing started, but it wasn't from the room I was in. It was from that of Mrs. Hendel's room. So I went in there, and she was backed against the wall, covering her ears and looking absolutely terrified. She said she couldn't get away from it. That's when I realized it was coming from the necklace around her neck. I had to shout over the wailing, but I confirmed the necklace was from the auction. She admitted she hadn't even thought to give it to me. Mom and Mama nodded, still listening intently. I wrapped it up in a cloth. The second it stopped touching her skin, the sound stopped. I finished. I guess the curse must have been activated by contact. Seems pretty benevolent to me, if crying's all it does. Now, it's not the wisest to assume anything about the behavior of the curse, Mama scolded, but Mom laughed. Lighten up, babe. To me, she added, great job, Alexis. Let's go and check out this necklace of yours. I tried my best to resist what I already knew my muscles would do, but as I knew it would, it happened anyway. I led my mothers, the people I'd loved most in the world, downstairs that didn't exist, into a basement made of nothing but vacant space. The not mothers reminded myself firmly as I felt the crow squeeze my shoulder again. Here it is, I said, opening a box of nothing. To my shock, the object was there. Not there, like everything else in the world was not, but really there. It was simple, a silver chain with a single gorgeous pearl set elegantly into the metal pendant. My mothers gathered around me, careful not to touch it. Looks pretty for someone that cries in the middle of the night, right? Right, Mama said with a chuckle, but Mom was silent. Mama noticed. Babe? It reeks, doesn't it? Said Mom, her voice blank in a way that made my skin crawl then, and it made my skin crawl now. Like blood. Babe, Mama said, urgency entering her voice. May, what's going on? It's... Mom backed up suddenly, her eyes widening. It's dripping blood, Leah. Can't you see it? Mama approached her slowly, hands held up. She glanced my way. Alexis, back up, she ordered. I obeyed without hesitation. To do anything else would have been mutinous in a household like ours, where following orders swiftly could be the difference between life and death. Mama returned her attention to Mom, her voice soothing. May, honey, remember where you are? You're with me and Alexis, okay? Whatever you're seeing or feeling, it isn't real. You know that. Think, my love. Love, Mom repeated blankly. Love. She turned to Mama slowly. So slowly, and something in her eyes wasn't right. Silent sobs shook my whole body. Unable to cry, but unable to stand there silently in my grief and terror. I wasn't sure whether that had been my reaction then, or if it was my reaction now. Perhaps it was both. "Oh, Leah," Mom said. "Oh, Leah, look at you. Blood everywhere." I approached the box slowly, glancing between the unassuming necklace and my mother's. My hand crept towards the box lid, hoping that covering the necklace would cease whatever connection it had formed. Skin contact my ass. Mom barely looked at the stupid thing. "You're here with me," Mama repeated calmly. "Just breathe, baby." "You're... May. No!" The second my hand had touched the lid of the box, Mom had turned and lunged for me. I was frightened, like a deer in headlights. I dropped the lid, staring with horror at my mom as she sprinted for me, a bloodlust in her eyes that I had never seen before. She never made it to me. Mama tackled her to the ground, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't know it when it happened, but watching it again, reliving it, I suspected she already knew what would happen next. She had enough experience with curses to know the signs, I suppose. "No!" Mom screamed. Her voice wasn't right, like there was another, deeper person behind it. "No.
No. Release me. Release me. The blood demands. The blood."
"May, please!" Mama sobbed, her well-defined muscles straining with the force of restraining her wife. My mother, Mom, screamed again, wordlessly, and Mama locked eyes with me. "Alexis, run! Don't look back!" This was the last time I ever disobeyed my mother's. It wasn't the first, although it hadn't happened in a long time. But watching the crazed eyes of my mom, I couldn't run. I just couldn't. It's my single greatest regret to this day, greater than any of the others, greater than anything I've ever known. I wish I had run. They might still be alive. I backed up one step, then another, but I couldn't make myself flee. I stood there instead, useless, a useless, stupid daughter, a child still somehow, even after all this time. "Mom," I whispered. Mom shrieked with more voices than her own, and with inhumane strength, she tossed Mama off of her like she weighed no more than a toy. Mama hit the opposite mall with a grunt, and Mom ran for me, more animal than human. In her hand, I spied a knife, a gift Mama had given her for their first anniversary, or so they told me. This time, my eyes filled with tears, but I knew that it was only because I cried back then, too. I was going to die. A gunshot, sharp and piercing, rang out. Mom jerked, then stopped. Then she fell, dark crimson soaking her white blouse. Behind her stood Mama, face streaked with tears and eyes wet. Her lip trembled. I think that's the only time I ever saw her lip tremble. "Alexis," she started. I wish I could close my eyes, but I hadn't then, so I didn't now. Mom sprang up with a growl, this time leaping for Mama. In mere seconds it was over. The knife had sliced clean through Mama's skin, her own blood pooling on the ground beneath her. Mom slowly turned to me while I gasped in shock and horror at the corpse of one mother on the floor, unmoving, the still bleeding form of the other advancing on me. I moved without thinking, grabbing the lid of the box, this time not stopping at Mom's scream. Even as she leapt at me, brandishing the bloody blade, I slammed the lid down over the necklace and closed my eyes. I don't know how long I squatted there, hands still on the closed box, eyes clenched shut in denial of the tragedy around me. All I know is that when I opened my eyes, the curse's effects had ceased, and both my mothers were gone. I knew what came next. I would run to them, crying and screaming their names incoherently. I would try first aid after calling an ambulance. It wouldn't matter, but I didn't do any of that. Instead, I froze, eyes dry again. The memory of my mother's on the ground didn't fade, but the knot's control over me did. I collapsed to my knees, taking heavy breaths that brought me no comfort, no oxygen. I had tried to forget what had happened to my mothers, what had happened because of me, for years. But in the end, that's not how curses work. You don't get to forget. The crow made a quiet noise on my shoulder, nudging my cheek with his beak. I turned my face to him slightly, chest still heaving despite the utter pointlessness of it. Why? I found myself asking him. Why did it? My voice choked off, but I knew the crow, whatever the hell he was, understood. He cawed a thoughtful, mournful sound, and pointed his beak at the box that concealed the necklace. I followed it, and a laugh bubbled out of me, bitter and contemptuous. Right, the stupid necklace. The second I get out of here, I'm destroying that thing. The crow gave me a reproachable look, but for once I didn't listen. I should have done it a long time ago, I spat. The crow inclined his head, and the tension faded out of my body. I'm sorry. You're right, I said distantly. My body felt hollow inside, as empty as this knot place inside the cabinet, from which I was starting to suspect I would never escape. It's a cursed object, and it didn't kill them on purpose. It was as much my fault as the necklace's, but I stared at it, still unable to cry for myself, for my mothers. I miss them. The crow didn't respond this time. Instead, he cocked his head as if listening. I'm not stupid, despite what this whole story may have led you to believe. It has been a stressful time, okay? I turned my left ear in the direction he was looking, straining to hear. Then finally, I did. Alexis! M, I said. The crow made a pleased, trilling sort of noise. My brain processed and caught up, and I yelled this time. M, I'm here. Alexis! M's voice yelled from the void. I raced forward, grasping blindly with my hands, desperate for rescue. She yelled again. Alexis! M, I screamed. I did trip this time, and I did not tumble into the void. Instead, I crashed to the ground, which was hard and cold and horribly smooth. I buried my face in my elbow. Please! Behind me, I heard my name repeated and echoed. I turned and saw them. My mothers, Courtney, M, everyone I'd ever known. They stood in a semicircle around me, calling for me, hands outstretched. They chanted my name like a prayer, and I stood slowly. I was going to go down fighting with these things, whatever they were. M's voice sang out again, and I let it fill me with strength. Sorry, buddy, I said to the crow, lowering myself into a fighting stance. It was laughable, really looking back. What was I gonna do? Punch the knot? The crow cocked his head again, considering me. Then he flew from my shoulder and spread his wings. He shrieked, a sound that cracked the very world surrounding us, like brittle old glass. The knot moved their smooth hands to cover their careless ears. Imitation faces screwed up in pain. The nothingness surrounded us flickered and faded, and then strengthened again. This cycled through, as though the crow had done some damage to the dimension, and it was desperately trying to fix it. The crow shrieked again, then took off flying. Out of instinct, and trust more than any conscious thought, I barreled after him. The faltering nothingness in front of me revealed a sliver of light. My heartbeat picked up. The doors to the cabinet, they were open, and beyond them, lovely dark eyes, brimming and wet, and familiar lips called my name. A smooth, cold hand wrapped around my ankle, and I stumbled. I glanced behind me, terror coursing through my veins. I saw the Not M grabbing me, a wolfish grin on its face. The crow swooped, my savior yet again, and nipped its hand. It reached to swat him, and in that movement of distraction, I pulled back my other foot and kicked its face as hard as I could. It released me, and I stumbled up and towards the light. I practically tackled M to the floor and gasped, "Shut that door!" The light I had emerged to was blinding, and I squinted against it. Her body was so warm against mine. I didn't stay awake long enough to see whether she closed them or not. The last thing I heard was the fluttering of the crow's wings as I lost consciousness.